The evening shift at St. Alder Medical Center began the way most Friday evenings did. Busy, loud, and carrying the weight of a city that never seemed to slow down. Rain tapped steadily against the wide emergency room windows, and the waiting area was already filled with restless families, exhausted workers, and patients clutching paper wristbands. Nurses moved quickly between stations, doctors reviewed charts, and overhead speakers called out room numbers every few minutes. For most of the staff, it was just another demanding night. For Elira Voss, it was the beginning of something no one in that building would ever forget. She arrived exactly 7 minutes before her shift started, as she always did. Her dark blue scrubs were crisp, her badge straight, and her expression calm in a way that often made people stop and notice. She wasn't the kind of person who raised her voice or rushed through hallways. Even in chaos, she moved with purpose. That evening, however, something about her seemed different. One of the younger nurses, Taryn, noticed it first. "You okay?" she asked as Elira tied her hair back near the nurse's station. Elira gave a small smile. "Just a feeling." Taryn laughed softly. "That sounds mysterious." "Maybe it is." She said it lightly, but her eyes drifted toward the ambulance entrance. The first patient arrived at 6:12 p.m. A man in his 40s, pale and struggling to breathe, was rushed in by paramedics. His oxygen levels were dropping fast, and the team moved immediately. The attending physician began issuing orders, but before anyone else reacted, Elira stepped to the bedside. "His airway's narrowing," she said firmly. "Prepare for intervention now." The physician hesitated for only a second before nodding. Tests later confirmed she was right. Minutes mattered. If they had waited, he might not have survived. The room settled once he was stabilized, but there was no time to reflect. At 6:19 p.m., a second emergency rolled in. A teenage girl suffering from a severe allergic reaction after an unknown exposure. Her condition deteriorated in seconds. Before the allergy team could be paged, Elira was already at her side, noticing subtle signs others had missed. "Double-check for cross-contact," she instructed. "And clear the left arm. Her veins are collapsing." Again, she was right. The treatment worked just in time. Taryn stared at her afterward, wide-eyed. "How did you know?" Elira only shook her head and moved on. At 6:27 p.m., the third patient arrived. A construction worker had collapsed at a nearby site. His symptoms suggested exhaustion, but Elira noticed something else. A faint discoloration in his fingertips, a pattern in his breathing. "It's not heat," she said. "Check for environmental exposure." The room shifted instantly. A toxicology consult confirmed dangerous inhalation from chemicals at the site. Without that call, the treatment plan would have gone in the wrong direction. By now, the emergency department had become tense. 3 critical cases in less than 20 minutes. And in every one of them, Elira had seen what others missed. Doctors exchanged glances. Nurses whispered. No one said it aloud, but everyone was beginning to feel it. Something unusual was happening. At 6:36 p.m., patient 4 arrived. A woman in her 60s, unresponsive in the back of a taxi. She had no identification and no medical records on file. While staff worked to assess her, Elira leaned closer, studying her breathing pattern. Then she asked an unexpected question. "Does anyone smell almonds?" The room went silent. One resident frowned. "What? Almonds?" Elira repeated. "Check immediately." The source was identified within minutes. A rare but dangerous exposure. Her observation changed everything. By 6:45 p.m., patient 5 entered the emergency room. A child. No one in the department forgot that moment. He was carried in by his father, frightened and barely conscious. The entire room shifted emotionally. Children always changed the atmosphere. Elira knelt beside him, speaking softly while the team prepared treatment. She noticed the bracelet on his wrist, a medical alert tag partially hidden beneath his sleeve. Others had missed it. That one detail prevented a medication error that could have worsened his condition. His father gripped Elira's arm afterward, tears in his eyes. "You saved him." She didn't answer. She simply gave him a steady nod and stepped back. At 6:52 p.m., patient 6 arrived. A businesswoman from a nearby hotel had collapsed during a conference. She appeared stable at first glance. Some staff assumed stress. Elira did not. She watched her hands tremble in a very specific rhythm. Then she noticed the pattern in her speech. "It's neurological," Elira said immediately. A specialist later confirmed the diagnosis. Early intervention prevented permanent damage. At this point, word had spread beyond the emergency room. Staff from other departments quietly gathered near the corridor, asking what was happening. How had one nurse identified 6 critical conditions faster than entire teams? And why did she seem so certain every time? Still, the night wasn't over. At exactly 7:03 p.m., patient 7 arrived. The final case, and the one that would leave the deepest mark. He was an elderly man found alone at a bus stop during the storm. Cold, confused, and barely responsive. At first, his condition seemed straightforward. But Elira noticed his pupils, then his pulse, then something in the way he held his right hand. She stepped closer, listening to his faint, slurred words. Her face changed. "Call imaging now," she said. The attending physician looked surprised. "For what?" Elira met his eyes. "Because if we wait 10 minutes, he may never speak again." The room obeyed. No one argued anymore. Scans confirmed a serious underlying condition that had not yet fully revealed itself. Because of that early action, treatment began immediately. And by 7:12 p.m., exactly 60 minutes after the first patient arrived, all 7 lives had been stabilized. 7 critical cases. 7 different emergencies. 1 hour. Every one of them survived. The emergency room, which had been filled with panic and urgency, suddenly felt still, like the entire department was trying to catch up with what had just happened. Taryn leaned against the nurse's station, shaking her head. "That wasn't normal." "No," another nurse whispered. "It wasn't." Across the room, 2 senior physicians quietly reviewed the charts. Every call Elira had made had been accurate. Every instinct had been supported by evidence. And yet none of it made sense. She wasn't a specialist in toxicology, neurology, emergency diagnostics, or pediatric medicine. She was a senior nurse. Highly respected, yes. Experienced, absolutely. But what happened that evening went far beyond skill. It was as if she had seen each case before it unfolded. As if she knew. Elira, meanwhile, washed her hands at the sink in silence. No celebration. No acknowledgement. No visible relief. Just quiet composure. Taryn approached carefully. "You really had a feeling?" Elira dried her hands and looked at her. "For some nights," she said softly. "You don't need to see the storm to know it's coming." Taryn frowned. Before she could ask anything else, the overhead doors near the hospital entrance opened. A sharp gust of rain-filled air swept through the hallway. Then came the sound of hurried footsteps. Several people in dark jackets entered the lobby. Not police. Not hospital staff. Their presence was immediate, commanding, and impossible to ignore. Conversations stopped. Phones lowered. Even the waiting room seemed to quiet. One of the hospital administrators rushed toward them, clearly confused. "Can I help you?" The lead official reached into his coat and displayed identification. The administrator's expression changed instantly. Within seconds, whispers spread. "FBI?" The letters moved through the room like electricity. Taryn turned toward Elira. Her face had gone pale, because Elira was no longer looking surprised. She was looking at them as if she had been expecting this moment. The lead agent stepped forward, scanning the room. Then he spoke clearly. "We're looking for Elira Voss." The entire emergency department froze. Every pair of eyes shifted toward her. For a moment, no one moved. Then Elira slowly stepped forward. "I'm Elira." The agent studied her carefully. Then he said the words no one there would ever forget. "We need to speak with you immediately." And just like that, the night everyone thought they understood became something else entirely. The words hung in the air long after the lead agent spoke them. "We need to speak with you immediately." For a moment, no one in the emergency department moved. It was as if the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. Doctors, nurses, patients, and visitors all stared at Elira Voss. She stood still, her shoulders straight, her hands relaxed at her sides. But those closest to her noticed something new in her expression. Something deeper than surprise. Recognition. Taryn stepped closer without thinking. Elira, what is this? Elira didn't answer right away. Her eyes remained on the agent. Then she gave a small nod. Of course. That was all she said. No questions. No resistance. Just two words that made everyone even more unsettled. The lead agent gestured toward the hallway. Private room. Hospital administrators rushed to assist, quickly opening the nearest conference room. The agents moved with calm precision, saying little. Their presence was professional, but impossible to ignore. As Elira walked past the nurse's station, Taryn grabbed her arm gently. Do you know them? Elira paused. For a second, it looked like she might explain. But instead, she simply said, Take care of the floor. Then she walked away. The conference room door closed behind them. The emergency department immediately erupted into whispers. What is happening? Why would the FBI come here? Did she do something? No way. She just saved 7 lives. That's exactly why this is strange. The rumors began before anyone had facts. Inside the room, Elira sat across from the lead agent and 2 others. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly. The lead agent placed a sealed folder on the table but did not open it. We've been searching for you for 6 months. Elira folded her hands. I didn't know I was missing. One of the agents exchanged a glance with the others. The lead agent leaned forward slightly. You left without notice. No forwarding contact. No official resignation. I resigned properly. From the hospital you were at then, yes. Elira's face remained calm. But not from us. Silence settled between them. The kind of silence built on history. The lead agent finally opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. Elira looked down. It was old. At least 8 years. In the picture, she stood in dark field gear beside emergency responders in an unfamiliar location. Her hair was shorter then, her expression sharper, almost unrecognizable. No one from the hospital would have believed it was her. But Elira recognized it immediately. Her fingers tightened slightly. You kept records. We keep everything. She looked back at him. I told your people I was done. You told one person. He promised it was enough. The agent's expression shifted. He's no longer in a position to make those decisions. That answer landed heavily. Elira leaned back, saying nothing. The lead agent continued. We're not here to drag you back into anything. But circumstances have changed. Then find someone else. We already tried. Another silence. The agent lowered his voice. There's a developing situation involving medical response patterns in 3 states. We need someone who understands rapid diagnosis under pressure. Elira gave a short, humorless breath. So you came to a hospital? We came because no one else on record has your success rate. She looked away for the first time. The room remained still. You watched tonight, she said. It wasn't a question. The agent nodded. For the last hour. She closed her eyes briefly. That explained too much. Outside the room, the hospital staff continued speculating. The medical director, Dr. Harland, stood near the conference room door with crossed arms. He had spent years working with Elira. He respected her, trusted her. But tonight had unsettled him. Because the woman he thought he knew suddenly felt like a stranger. Taryn stood nearby, refusing to leave. She's not in trouble, she said. It sounded more like a plea than a statement. Dr. Harlan sighed. I hope not. At the nurse's station, someone had already begun reviewing Elira's personnel file. It was thorough but strangely ordinary. Nursing school records, recommendations, past hospital employment, certifications. Nothing extraordinary. No mention of federal work. No special clearances. Nothing that explained what they had witnessed. And yet everyone felt the same thing. The file was incomplete. Back inside the conference room, Elira studied the folder in front of her. There were maps, reports, medical summaries, patterns. The details were complicated, but one thing was clear. The federal team wanted her expertise, and not because of her nursing license. "You disappeared on purpose," the lead agent said. "Yes. Why?" She looked at him steadily. "Because some work changes how you see people. And I wanted to remember how to help them, not study them." The room grew quiet again. That answer carried more truth than explanation. The agent nodded once. "We understand that." "No. You understand policy, not choice." He didn't argue. Instead, he asked the question carefully. "Then why medicine?" Elira's expression softened. "For the same reason I left." He waited. "Because saving one person in front of you matters more than chasing 10 you'll never meet." For the first time, one of the agents looked genuinely affected. The lead agent closed the folder. "You've built a life here." "Yes. And if we walk away tonight? Then I'll return to my shift." "But if we don't?" She held his gaze. "Then you'd better give me a reason worth leaving it." Outside, nearly 40 minutes had passed. The tension in the hospital hadn't eased. If anything, it had deepened. Every staff member who had worked with Elira replayed the last several years in their mind. Had there been signs? Small clues? Unusual knowledge? There had been moments. Times when Elira handled impossible cases with unsettling calm. Times when she anticipated emergencies before they escalated. Times when she knew protocols outside her department. But everyone had simply called it experience. Now they wondered if it had been something else. Terrence sat at the desk, staring at the closed conference room door. She remembered the first day she met Elira. She had seemed quiet, almost reserved, but never cold. She mentored younger nurses, stayed late when needed, comforted families, remembered birthdays. Nothing about her suggested secrecy, and yet, the woman in that old photograph, if it was truly her, belonged to another world. The conference room door finally opened. Everyone stood. Elira stepped out first. Her face was composed, but thoughtful. The agents followed. No handcuffs, no urgency, no public statements, just controlled professionalism. Dr. Harland approached immediately. "Ms. Voss, are you all right?" Elira gave him a small nod. "Yes, that's all. For now." The lead agent stepped beside her. "We'll need further discussion tomorrow morning." Terrence stared. "Tomorrow?" Elira looked at her briefly, then back to the agent. "I'll consider it." He handed her a sealed envelope. Location inside. 9 a.m. She accepted it without opening it. Then the agents left as quietly as they had arrived. The room remained silent until the front doors closed behind them. Only then did everyone speak at once. "What was that? Are you okay? What do they want? Who are you?" The last question came softly, not accusing, just honest. Elira looked at the people surrounding her. The team she had worked beside for years. People who trusted her. People who now looked at her differently. She understood why. And for the first time all night, uncertainty crossed her face. "I'm still the same person who walked in tonight," she said. Dr. Harland answered carefully. "Then help us understand." Elira glanced at the envelope in her hand, then back at them. "There are parts of my life I left behind for a reason." Terrence stepped closer. "Because they were dangerous?" Elira shook her head. "Because they made me forget what ordinary people carry every day." The room quieted. She continued, "I chose this hospital because it reminded me that real strength isn't found in classified reports or controlled operations." She looked toward the emergency rooms. "It's found here, in people fighting through fear, in families waiting for answers, in teams who stay long after their shift ends." No one interrupted. Her voice remained steady. "I came here to build something honest." Terrence's eyes filled slightly. "And was it?" Elira met her gaze. "Yes." That answer mattered. More than anyone expected. Dr. Harland exhaled. Then whatever happens tomorrow, you have a place here. Elira looked at him with quiet gratitude. But her eyes drifted once more to the envelope. Because even as the hospital slowly returned to motion, she knew one truth she couldn't avoid. Her past had found her. And this time it had arrived with purpose. As the shift continued, whispers remained. Questions lingered. And upstairs, in a quiet office, someone reopened her personnel file. Because the more they searched, the more one detail stood out. For someone with such an ordinary record, there were entire years with no trace at all. And those missing years held the answers everyone was desperate to know. Elira barely slept that night. She returned to her apartment long after midnight, carrying the sealed envelope in one hand and the weight of too many unanswered questions in the other. The city outside had gone quiet, but her mind had not. She set the envelope on her kitchen table and stared at it for several minutes before finally opening it. Inside was a simple card. A time. An address. No explanation. No agency logo. No names. Just instructions. She turned the card over. Blank. For a moment she considered not going. She could ignore it. Return to the hospital. Continue the life she had built. But deep down, she knew that option had already disappeared the moment those agents walked into the emergency department. Her past had stepped into the light. And once that happened, there was no pretending it had never existed. By 8:45 the next morning, she was standing outside a federal office building in the center of the city. The structure looked ordinary: glass, steel, security barriers. Nothing dramatic, but its simplicity made it feel even more serious. She gave her name at the front desk. No surprise, no delay. They were expecting her. A security officer escorted her upstairs and into a private conference room. The lead agent from the hospital was already there. This time he was alone. He stood as she entered. "Thank you for coming. I almost didn't. I assumed as much." She remained near the door. "Say what you need to say." The agent nodded and motioned toward the table. Spread across it were reports, medical summaries, and several digital tablets. He pushed one toward her. She looked at the screen. A list of emergency cases. Different states. Different hospitals. Different patients. At first glance, unrelated. Then she noticed the similarities. Symptoms misread. Rare complications. Critical timing windows. She looked up sharply. "These are pattern-linked. That's what we believe." "How many?" 23 cases in the last 4 months. She scrolled further. "Fatalities." The agent hesitated. "Some." Elira's jaw tightened. "And you waited this long?" "We needed confirmation before reaching out." "No," she said coldly. "You needed someone else to fail first." The room went still. The agent did not deny it. That told her enough. She set the tablet down. "What exactly do you want from me?" He took a breath. "Consultation. That's all. For now." She almost laughed. "Nothing with your agency is ever for now." The agent looked at her carefully. "You left because you wanted a normal life. I left because I was done being used as a solution for systems that refused to fix themselves." His face shifted slightly. There it was. The truth he had expected but still needed to hear. He lowered his voice. "We're not asking you to rejoin anything. We're asking for your expertise." "My expertise has a cost." He met her eyes. "What cost?" Elira answered without hesitation. "Honesty." That landed harder than he expected. He opened a folder and slid it across the table. "This is everything." She studied him. "Everything. As much as we legally can disclose." She opened it. Inside were internal notes, case links, field observations, and one phrase repeated several times. "Adaptive response failure." She frowned, then froze, because she recognized it. A term from years ago. One almost no one outside a closed program would know. She looked up slowly. That terminology shouldn't exist anymore. The agent nodded. It resurfaced. Her voice dropped. "From where?" He paused. "That's what we're trying to understand." She turned pages faster, then stopped at one document. A scanned report with a signature she knew instantly. Not because she had seen it often, but because she never forgot it. Her expression changed. The agent noticed. "You recognize it." She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was quieter. "I trained under that director. He disappeared 6 years ago." "I know. We believe he may be connected." Elira stepped back from the table. For the first time since entering, her composure cracked. Only slightly, but enough. The agent watched carefully. "This matters to you." She gave him a hard look. "It should matter to everyone." He said nothing, because now he understood. This wasn't just a professional request. It was personal. She closed the folder. "I need context." "You'll have it. No filtered briefings. No selected truths." He nodded. "Agreed." She studied him for a long moment, then asked the question she had avoided. "Why me really?" He answered honestly. "Because you were the best field diagnostician the program ever had." She looked away. That was another life. Maybe, but the skills remained. She thought of the 7 patients from the night before. How instinct had returned before thought. How her body had remembered patterns her mind tried to bury. Maybe he was right. That unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. He slid another file toward her. "This contains the next scheduled review site." She glanced at the city listed. Not far. A regional medical center. Her chest tightened, because she knew that hospital. She had trained there during residency years ago. Another thread from the past. Too many coincidences. Or none at all. She looked back at him. "When?" "Tonight." She exhaled sharply. "Of course." The agent softened his tone. "You can still walk away." Elira held the file. Thought about the hospital. About Taryn. About Dr. Harland. About the life she had rebuilt with care. Then she thought about the reports. The patients. The repeated failures. And the signature. She made her decision. "I'll review the case." The agent nodded. "That's all we ask." She pointed at him. "For now." He allowed the smallest smile. "Fair enough." By the afternoon, Elira returned briefly to St. Alder. Not in uniform. Not as part of her shift. She needed to speak with Dr. Harland. He was waiting in his office. When she entered, he stood immediately. "I had a feeling you'd come." She closed the door. "I need leave." He studied her. "How long?" "I don't know." That answer was not comforting. He sat down slowly. "Can you tell me where you're going?" "No." "Can you tell me why?" She hesitated, then gave the most honest answer she could. "Because something I left unfinished may be hurting people." Dr. Harland leaned back. He believed her, not because he understood, but because he had seen the seriousness in her eyes. "You're really not just a nurse, are you?" She gave a faint smile. "I am a nurse." He nodded. "But not only that." No response. That was answer enough. He signed the leave form without another question. As she stood to go, he spoke again. "Elira." She turned. "If this puts you in danger." She stopped him. "It won't." Then, after a beat, "And if it does, I know how to come back." He held her gaze. "That's what worries me." Outside his office, Taryn was waiting. Arms folded. Clearly upset. "You were going to leave without telling me?" Elira sighed softly. "I was trying not to." "That makes no sense." "It does to me." Taryn stepped closer. "Then help me understand." Elira looked at her friend, because that's what she had become over the years. More than a coworker. More than a trainee. Someone she trusted. And that made this harder. "There was a chapter of my life before this hospital," Elira said carefully. "One I kept separate for good reason." Taryn listened. "It involved work that demanded skills I hoped never to use again. And now those skills may be needed." Taryn's eyes searched hers. "Will you come back?" Elira answered honestly. "I plan to." "That's not the same as promising." "No," she admitted. "It isn't." Taryn swallowed, then reached into her pocket and handed Elira a small object. Her hospital badge clip. A simple silver pin. You forgot this yesterday. Elira looked at it, surprised. Terrence smiled sadly. Take it. Why? So you remember where you belong. That hit harder than either expected. Elira accepted it quietly. Then, without words, hugged her. A rare gesture. One Terran would remember for years. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Elira stood once more at a crossroads she thought she had left behind. A black vehicle waited at the curb. The same lead agent inside. She looked once at the hospital behind her. At the entrance where everything had changed. Then she got in. As the city blurred past, she fastened the silver badge clip inside her coat pocket. A reminder, promise, and maybe a reason to return. The agent beside her handed over the final briefing. She opened it, then went still, because staring back at her from the first page was a name she never expected to see again. A name tied to the very program she thought had ended. A name from her past. And the one person she believed was gone forever. The name on the first page made Elira stop breathing for a moment. It wasn't just a name. It was a memory she had buried so deep that even thinking about it felt like reopening a sealed wound. She stared at the document for a long time without turning the page. The agent beside her said nothing. He didn't rush her. He didn't explain. He simply watched, as if he already understood that whatever she was reading carried weight far beyond the job. Finally, Elira turned the page. More details followed. Dates, locations, internal notes, old program references, and then a photograph. The same man, older now but unmistakable. Her voice came out quieter than she expected. This isn't possible. The agent spoke carefully. We believe it is. Elira leaned back in her seat, gripping the edge of the folder. That man was declared missing. Yes. And officially closed. Yes. She shut the file. No. The agent frowned slightly. No. That's not how it ended. A silence followed. The vehicle moved through traffic, city lights sliding across the windows. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Elira's mind had already gone somewhere else. Back years ago. Back to a different building. A different kind of silence. A place where emergencies weren't loud and chaotic like hospitals, but controlled, precise, and deeply uncomfortable. She remembered training rooms with no windows. Simulated crises designed to break decision-making patterns. And him. Always him at the center of it. Not loud. Not emotional. Just present. Observing. Guiding. Testing. The man whose name now sat in that file. The agent broke the silence. We didn't want to involve you until we confirmed multiple links. Elira looked at him. And now we believe he's connected to the pattern. She shook her head slowly. He doesn't work in patterns. He designs systems. That statement made the agent pause. You sound like you know him personally. Elira didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, I trained under him. The agent nodded. We saw that in your records. You saw part of it. He studied her carefully. What didn't we see? Elira hesitated, then looked out the window. Everything that matters. The car slowed as they approached the regional medical center mentioned in the briefing. It was large, modern, and heavily active. Emergency lights flickered near the entrance. Ambulances came and went in steady rhythm. To anyone else, it looked like a normal hospital. But Elira's expression changed the moment she saw it. This is the site? She asked. Yes. Her jaw tightened slightly. I've been here before. The agent glanced at her. In what context? Training rotations. Early field integration. He processed that. You know the layout? I know more than the layout. That answer made him go quiet again. They entered through a restricted access point. Inside, the atmosphere was different from St. Alder. Less chaotic. More structured. Controlled. Too controlled. Elira noticed small details immediately. Security presence at specific intersections. Staff movement patterns that didn't match typical hospital flow. Unusual pauses between shifts. She slowed slightly as they walked. The agent noticed. Something wrong. Something's off. she said quietly. Explain. She pointed subtly toward a corridor. No family waiting cluster near emergency intake. That's not normal for a center this size. The agent looked. You're sure? I'm sure. They continued forward. A conference room had been prepared. Inside were several analysts and a second medical consultant already reviewing data. When Elira entered, conversations stopped. One of the analysts stood. Dr. Voss. She corrected automatically. Nurse Voss. The analyst hesitated. Sorry, we've read your file. You read a version of it, she replied. That immediately set the tone in the room. The agent placed the folder on the table. We'll begin. Elira didn't sit yet. She scanned the room, noticing everything. The way monitors were positioned, the placement of documents, the subtle tension in the staff. Then she said something unexpected. Where is your incident log from last night? The analysts exchanged looks. We don't have a relevant incident from last night, one replied. Elira looked at him directly. Yes, you do. Silence. The agent turned slightly toward her. What are you referring to? She stepped closer to the table. At 2:17 a.m., your emergency intake system flagged 3 simultaneous respiratory distress cases from different locations. The room went still. The analyst frowned. That's not in our report. It should be, Elira said calmly. She reached out and tapped a printed chart. These timestamps are missing. One of the analysts checked his screen quickly, then paused, then checked again. His expression changed. That data was suppressed in the preliminary summary. The agent straightened. Why? No one answered immediately. Elira spoke again. Because they weren't random. The room focused on her. She continued. They followed a sequence. The analyst frowned. What sequence? Elira pointed at the charts. Time gaps decrease in a predictable pattern. Geographic distance increases linearly. And symptoms escalate in severity based on arrival order. The room fell quiet again. The agent looked at her. That suggests coordination. Elira nodded. Not suggests. Confirms. One of the staff members muttered. That's not possible. Elira turned toward him. It is if you're testing response predictability. That sentence changed the energy in the room. The analyst slowly sat back down. You're saying someone is staging medical emergencies? Elira corrected him. I'm saying someone is observing how you respond to them. The agent leaned forward. Why? She hesitated for the first time since arriving. Then said quietly, to refine a system that learns from human error. The room went cold. Another analyst spoke. That's theoretical. Elira shook her head. I've seen it before. The agent looked at her carefully. In your training? Yes. She paused. Except back then, it was controlled simulations. And now? She looked at the file again. Now it's not controlled. The silence that followed was heavier than before. The agent finally spoke. You believe your former director is behind this? Elira didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the photograph again, then nodded once. Yes, the agent frowned. But he was removed from operational authority years ago. That doesn't mean he stopped thinking. That line landed hard. One of the analysts spoke carefully. If this is real, we need confirmation before escalating. Elira looked at him. How many confirmations do you need before someone dies? No one responded. Because there was no good answer. The agent closed the folder. We move carefully. Elira's voice stayed calm, but firm. Carefully gets people killed. That statement shifted the dynamic. The agent met her eyes. What would you do? Elira didn't hesitate. I would trace the pattern backward instead of forward. She pointed at the chart. These aren't random cases. They're feedback points. Feedback for what? For learning human response limits. The analyst leaned forward. That's not medical research. That's behavioral mapping. Elira nodded. Yes. The room went quiet again. The agent stood. Then we need to locate the source. Elira added quietly. And whoever is running it now. That detail made the agent pause. Now, she looked at him. He's not the only one who understands the system. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Then the agent made a decision. We initiate expanded review. Elira shook her head. That's too slow. He looked at her. What's your alternative? She hesitated, then said something that surprised everyone. I go back into the field. The room reacted immediately. No, the analyst said. That's not protocol. You're a medical consultant, another added. The agent raised a hand. Let her finish. Elira met his gaze. If these patterns continue, you need someone who recognizes deviations in real time. And you believe that's you? Yes. The confidence in her voice wasn't arrogance. It was experience. The agent studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Conditionally approved. The room reacted again, but he ignored it. One escort only. No independent action. Elira accepted immediately. Fine. The agent added one more line. And if you're wrong? Elira looked at the file one last time. Then people stay safe. He nodded. That's all we can ask. As the meeting ended, Elira stepped outside the conference room for a moment. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes briefly. For the first time since leaving the hospital, she felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not confusion, but pressure. Because this wasn't just about past connections anymore. It was happening now. And somewhere out there, systems were watching, adjusting, learning. And she had just stepped back into their field of view. When she opened her eyes, the agent was beside her. You okay? Elira looked down the corridor. I think I just made things worse. He shook his head slightly. Or clearer. She didn't respond. Because deep down, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever this was, it was no longer something she could walk away from. The morning after the meeting at the regional medical center did not feel like morning at all. Elira had not slept. Not because she was afraid, but because her mind refused to slow down. Every pattern she had seen, every file she had reviewed, every name tied to the system kept looping through her thoughts like a warning she could not ignore. By 6:10 a.m., she was already dressed. Not in hospital scrubs. Not in formal clothing. Something practical. Something that reminded her of her past life, even if she did not want to admit it. The agent assigned to her was waiting outside the building when she arrived. He didn't greet her with unnecessary words. He simply said, "We move in 30 minutes." Elira nodded once. "Where?" He handed her a small device. A location was already loaded. She looked at it, then looked at him. "This is close to St. Alder." Yes. That detail settled heavily in her chest, though she did not show it. They drove in silence. The city passed by slowly, as if unaware of what was unfolding beneath its surface. Elira kept watching the route. Every turn mattered. Every distance mattered. Because if the patterns she had identified were correct, they were not chasing random incidents anymore. They were moving toward a source, and sources were never safe. The vehicle finally slowed near an unmarked facility on the edge of the city. It did not look like a hospital. From the outside, it resembled a research annex or administrative center. No emergency signs, no public entry, just security gates and controlled access points. Elira immediately noticed something wrong. There were too many cameras, too precisely placed. Not for security, for observation. She stepped out of the vehicle slowly. The agent followed. "Stay close," he said. "I don't need reminders," she replied quietly. They approached the entrance. Inside, the lighting was sterile. White walls, polished floors, controlled temperature. Everything designed to feel calm. But Elira knew that calm environments often meant controlled environments. And controlled environments meant data collection. A staff member met them at the entrance. No surprise in their expression, as if they had already been expected. "This way," the staff member said. They were led down a corridor. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. Elira's instincts sharpened. She slowed slightly. The agent noticed. "What is it?" She looked at the walls. The ventilation pattern changed. He frowned. And that means different containment zones. They continued walking. Soon they entered a large observation room. Screens lined the walls. Dozens of them. Some displayed hospital feeds. Some showed data charts. Others showed live monitoring from different locations. Elira stopped. Her eyes moved quickly across the screens. Then she saw it. Her breath slowed. The agent followed her gaze. What are you seeing? Elira didn't answer immediately, because on one of the screens, she recognized St. Alder Medical Center. Live. She stepped forward slightly. That's not surveillance, she said quietly. The agent looked at her. What do you mean? This is active integration. Before he could ask, another voice spoke from behind them. Correct. Elira turned slowly, and for a moment, everything inside her went still. The man standing there looked older than she remembered, but not unfamiliar. He carried himself the same way, calm, measured, controlled. The same presence that once filled training rooms where decisions were broken down into patterns and rebuilt into systems. The same man whose name had appeared in the file. The one everyone believed was gone. He looked at Elira as if no time had passed. You arrived faster than expected. The agent immediately tensed. Identify yourself. The man didn't even look at him. His eyes remained on Elira. You already know who I am. Elira finally spoke. I thought you were dead. A faint smile crossed his face. Convenient assumption. The room felt smaller suddenly. The agent stepped slightly forward. This facility is under federal review. The man finally glanced at him. And you are? Federal oversight. Not relevant. The agent stiffened. Elira raised a hand slightly. Stop. The agent looked at her. You know him? Elira didn't take her eyes off the man. I used to. The man nodded once. Still precise with words. Good. Elira's voice stayed controlled. Why are you here? He gestured toward the screens. Because systems evolve. That's not an answer. It is the only one that matters. She stepped closer to him. You disappeared. I transitioned. Into what? He looked at her directly now. Observation. That word carried weight. Elira understood immediately. This isn't research anymore. It never was just research. The agent interrupted. You've been linked to multiple unexplained medical incidents. The man finally looked at him again. Incidents are data points. Elira's expression tightened. You're testing real people. I'm studying response reliability. That's not science, she said sharply. That's control. For the first time, his expression shifted slightly. Not anger. Not defensiveness. Just acknowledgement. Control is a necessary illusion in systems that depend on human unpredictability. Elira shook her head. You used to teach prevention. I still do. No, she said firmly. You teach reaction now. He didn't deny it. That silence confirmed more than words could. The agent looked between them. This has to stop. The man finally turned toward him fully. You are misunderstanding scale. Explain it then. The man gestured toward the screens again. Every hospital you see here is connected. Every case feeds into a model. Every response refines prediction accuracy. Elira's voice sharpened. At the cost of lives. He met her gaze. At the cost of inefficiency. That sentence landed like a strike. Elira's jaw tightened. You don't see people anymore. I see patterns. That's not the same thing. It is more reliable. For a moment, the room felt completely still. Then Elira asked quietly, was St. Alder part of this? He paused. Yes. The agent immediately reacted. You monitored her hospital? The man nodded slightly. Among others. Elira's voice dropped. And the 7 patients? He studied her carefully. That shift was statistically significant. Her eyes hardened. So you watched them suffer. I observed their progression. That's not observation, she said. That's exploitation. He didn't respond immediately. Then he said something that made the room colder. Progress requires cost. Elira took a step closer. Not human cost. He tilted his head slightly. You left because you believed that distinction mattered. I left because it does matter. He studied her for a long moment, then spoke softly. And yet you returned. That hit differently, because it was true. She didn't answer. The agent stepped forward. You're under arrest. The man didn't react. Instead, he pressed a small button on a console. Nothing dramatic happened. No alarms. No chaos. Just a shift in lighting across the screens. Then every display changed. St. Alder. Regional Center. Multiple hospitals. All showing synchronized data flows. Elira immediately understood. This isn't just monitoring, she said slowly. The man nodded. It's adaptation. The agent frowned. Adaptation to what? Elira answered before he could. To us. Silence. The man finally spoke again. You were always the strongest variable. Elira stared at him. That's why you brought me here. No, he said calmly. That's why I waited for you to return. The room tightened. The agent looked alarmed now. Return to what? The man stepped closer to Elira. To completion. Her expression shifted slightly. For what? He looked at her with something almost like respect. A system that no longer fails under human unpredictability. Elira shook her head. You're removing humanity from medicine. I'm refining it. That's not refinement, she said quietly. That's replacement. For a moment no one spoke. Then Elira made a decision. She turned slightly toward the agent. Get everyone out of St. Alder. He blinked. What? Now? He hesitated. The man watched them both. You cannot stop distributed systems. Elira looked back at him. I don't need to stop it everywhere. She paused. I just need to break the feedback loop. The man's expression changed slightly. Interesting. The agent stepped closer. What are you planning? Elira looked at the screens one last time, then said quietly, disrupt the observation layer. The man finally showed something close to concern. You would collapse years of work. You collapsed people's lives, she replied. The agent moved immediately. I'm calling in full shutdown protocol. The man did not resist. Instead, he said one last thing to Elira. You taught me efficiency once. She looked at him. And you forgot everything else. For the first time, she saw something human flicker in his expression. Something old. Something unresolved. But it was gone quickly. Because systems don't stop for emotion. The agent grabbed Elira's arm. We need to leave. She nodded. But as they turned toward the exit, the man spoke again. Elira. She stopped. He said quietly, if you shut this down, hospitals will lose predictive stability. She looked back at him. Then we'll learn to treat people like people again. He studied her. That is inefficient. She replied simply, yes. Then she walked out. Behind them, the screens continued to flicker. And somewhere across the city, St. Alder Medical Center continued its normal shift, unaware that the system watching it had just begun to fracture. As Elira stepped into the sunlight outside the facility, she finally exhaled. The agent beside her spoke. Was he telling the truth? Elira looked back once at the building. Yes. And will it collapse? She adjusted the silver badge clip in her pocket. Yes. A pause. But not before we decide what replaces it. And for the first time since the beginning of it all, Elira didn't feel like she was chasing the past anymore. She felt like she was standing at the edge of something that could change the future entirely.